Hello, my name's Pete Jennings, and this is a talk about the wild hunt and its followers. And the wild hunt means all sorts of things to all different people, of course. So, in essence, the wild hunt is variously a train of spirits, usually mounted on horses, but sometimes goats, pigs, and other animals, plus witches, fairies, corpses, soldiers, knights, and ghosts, riding as a hunt across the sky or sometimes land, and living in a various um, sort of forms across northern Europe and Scandinavia. They're generally led by a known pagan god or goddess, or sometimes by a famous or infamous character associated with the land that they cross. What beast or lost soul they are hunting for is also a variable, down to local legend and folklore. The hunt may be silent, but more often is described as having an awful din of shrieks, hunting horns, chains, and thunder accompanying it. And most often it is in the winter time when those winter gales blow across the skies. The meaning of the phenomenon and the beliefs associated with it have been changed over the centuries. This is especially the case with the reinterpretation of it by Christian clerics, who seem to have seized upon it as just another way of frightening their congregations away from sin, in the same way as they've adapted other beliefs, sites, and festivals. Of course, it's also known by a variety of names. As well as the Wild Hunt, it's also known as the Furious Host, the Wild Army, the Hurlething, Woden's Army, the Hounds of Anoon, and many others. And as usual with most scary things, it's mainly seen by night. There are stories of it from throughout the year, but the season of winter's howler gales does seem to the most suggest its screaming pursuit across the skies, particularly between Yule and Twelfth Night. A lesser known aspect of the wild hunt is that at least two credible sources refer to a folk custom of a procession of masked people emulating the myth. This then poses the question of whether all reports of the procession are of a supernatural sort. There is a possibility that some descriptions could actually be eyewitness reports of an actual live folk tradition that's got a bit jumbled up over time. Most reports of the wild hunt and its variants occur across northern Europe and into Scandinavia, but that's not to say that there aren't exceptions outside of the area, and all the similar traditions all have the same source. One can come up with a very similar story in different geographic locations without an awareness of the other. Nor do I accept that because two things are similar, they are the same. A scarf and a tie. Both are made of fabric and wrapped around the neck, but few people would insist they're the same thing. In the field of folklore and mythology, one has to be very aware of not seeing connections without reasonable proof. So let's have a brief but not exhaustive guide to some of the variants across a number of countries. In Czechoslovakia and the older former countries in the area, called Divaki Hon or Zvani, the Wild Hunt. Guernsey, the Channel Islands, the Wild Hunt is led by Herodias and has sea witches in its troop. Italy, Theodoric the Great, Ostrogoth, King of Italy, and La Donna del Zosch of Lombardy as the Lady of the Game are leaders. In the Netherlands, there's an unusual name for the myth here, Gate met Hund, Gate with his little dogs, but sometimes the name Dirk or Hench is substituted. There's a glowing horse. In Poland, here the hunt is called Dziki Gon, wild hunting with animals, or Dziki Lo, wild hunt. Spain, we have Estanjica, the old army, Hostia, Campana, Santa Campana, the troop or company, and Gestia, are some of the names given. From Catalonia comes a leader called Count Arno, Comte Arno, a legendary nobleman from Ripoll, who, for his reputation for cruelty and sexual misdemeanors, is sentenced to ride to hounds, including Urko, the black dog, for eternity, while his flesh is devoured by flames. His story is contained in a traditional Catalan folk song. And one other, Switzerland, Woden or Reinfried von Braunschweig seem to be the alternate leaders. The Wood is here, the Woden's army, or Justin Gegejak. Probably pronounced that absolutely miserably wrong. but no one to guide me. So, a picture of a Germanic wild hunt, and they've got several tales, some of which are reenacted as folk customs. And the names of these hordes are variously Wotan's hunt, Wotan's army, and the veiled jacket. However, there are also traditions of females leading the hunt, including the goddesses Perchta, Holda, and a white lady known as Frau Woden. The latter is said to lead processions of dead children who were not baptized whilst living. The procession is associated with fertility and credited with bringing luck, um, and planting, childbirth, and the production of textiles. Some German legends include an old character called Honest Eckhard, who rides a white horse and warns people to get out of the way. He has some of the similarities to the attributes of Odin, a broad-brimmed hat and a long beard, but was identified by Grimm as the chamber of Kriemhild from the Nibelungenlied. In Austria, the name Krampus still survives. And here are some Krampus together with some Perchten. Um, Krampus actually is an old German term for claw. It's a demonic horned creature who still survives around Germany and has found its way into the UK. And there's a custom in the area for young men to dress up as him, and it's found in alpine regions in Hungary and Croatia and elsewhere. So they wear horned masks and either black rags, sacking, or goatskins. Often drag chains, ring cowbells, and clear the way with switches made of bundles of twigs. And sometimes their custom is merged with the custom of the Perchten. Throughout the years, the mythology of the hunt has adapted to suit the geographical area and the time period. In the Middle Ages, an example, the lead huntsmen include Charlemagne of France and Frederick Barbarossa. Some more wonderful Krampus here. There's a later German folk tale that states the leader was Hans von Hackenberg, a semi-historical figure who died in either 1521 or 1581. And it said he had slain a boar and was then injured on the foot by the boar's tusk and died of poisoning. As he died, he declared that he had no wish to enter heaven, but instead wanted to hunt. His wish was granted, and he was permitted, or perhaps cursed, to hunt in the night sky. Another version of the tale has it that he was condemned to lead the wild hunt as punishment for his sins. But even behind this 16th century character lies a more ancient element, perhaps, harking back to the original tradition surrounding the hunt. Hacklenberg, it's been suggested, is simply a corruption of Hackelbrand, the old Saxon epithet for Woden, also a mythical hunt leader in Westphalia. Most of the names of leaders and hunts in the Germanic areas are Woden delivered, but King Christian II is a popular leader in Norway and Germany, whilst King Valdemar of Denmark, 1157 to 1182, is associated with a hunt in Jutland. There's also a very localized variant of Graf von Ebenberg of Zabelsdorf, and also come across Rita Alka, connected to a tradition in the Greifenhagen. Phantom dogs are described in great detail in British folklore. These black spectral hounds bear almost as many names as the wild hunt itself, and are one of the most common features within the mythology, just behind the name leaders. Black Shook, who you can see here on the right, is a psychopomp. That is an omen of death. And on the left, you can see a black dog of Guernsey in the Channel Islands, who was used by smugglers to scare intruders away from what they were doing, but later used in parades and processions. Black Shook has a couple of stories in Suffolk, one at St Mary's in Bungay and one at All Saints Blythburgh. You can see a burnt claw mark on the north door of the latter church accredited to him. The Bungay incident of the 4th of August 1577 was written up by Abraham Fleming in a black letter pamphlet. Although it was August, typically for Suffolk to keep the tourists away, there was said to be a thunderstorm overhead at the time. And a man and the boy in the congregation were killed. As a psychophant, there's a belief that looking directly into black saucer-like fiery eyes will cause death or disaster either instantly or within a 12-month. At Blythburgh, part of the tower crashed down, and again 2 of the congregation were killed. Sightings never seem to be much more than a few miles inland from the east coast, and they range from the mainly marshy, wet places starting south in the Malden area and around East Anglia up as far as York in Yorkshire in the north, known as the Viking Jorvik, where he's known as the largest. Other names around the area include galley trot, padfoot, gear trash, old shug, shug monkey, and others. There's been a theory that maybe he's a remnant of a filger, a fetch, sent to clear the coastal paths for raiding Vikings. Of course, it's speculation, but personally I find it at least possible. The locations all fall within the old Danelaw area and the area that they used to raid. The name Shuck is believed to be of Anglo-Saxon origin from 1,000 years before the Bungay and Blythburgh incidents. It's thought to derive from the Old English word Shaka, meaning demon. The term is also used to describe Grendel and his mother in the Anglo-Saxon poem Beowulf. There are 2 monsters who dwell in marshland, and they have glowing eyes, and Dr. Sam Newton has pointed out that the East Anglian dialect word Grindle, which is preserved in some Suffolk place names, means a drainage ditch or wet place. So this could be the origin of the name of Grendel as a creature who lives on the marsh. Also provides extra evidence for Dr. Newton's theory, which I support, that Beowulf, although about the Swedish tribe, the Geats, was actually written down in East Anglia. Back in the 1970s, an elderly chap who used to visit the Oyster pub in Suffolk, where I used to go for folk singing sessions on Sunday nights, he arrived as white as a sheet on one weekday night. He said that he'd been pushing his bike downhill on the way to the pub when he encountered a large spectral dog. Being generally afraid of dogs, he just kept going and not stared into its eyes, but the beast went straight through him. Another old chap brought him a brandy to settle his nerves, and this was commented upon afterwards as proof of how ill he looked. His benefactor had never been known to ever buy a drink for anyone else before, and generally dodged buying his own if he could. Long after my own original researches, I found a wonderful book on the subject of Black Chuck of the Wild Hunt. It even quotes me. Explore Phantom Black Dogs, edited by L.B. Stone, was really the first effort to look at the psychology of the phenomena along with the folklore, and I can really recommend it. Picture of St. Guthlac of Crowland in the Fens, and he lived as a hermit on an island in the Fens at Crowland, or Croyland as it's sometimes called, in the early 8th century, not that far from Peterborough. And he was reportedly beset by spectral creatures attacking him after upsetting him by singing Christian psalms, which is the same sort of reason that was blamed for Grendel attacking the hall in Beowulf, and yet more evidence linking the poem with an East Anglian origin. Elsewhere in the Peterborough area, it's mentioned again in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle of 1127 AD. We find the following in translation. It was seen and heard by many men, many hunters riding. The hunters were black and great and loathy, and the hounds all black and wide-eyed and loathy, and they rode on black horses and black he-goats. This was seen in the very deer park in the town of Peterborough, and in all the woods from the same town to Stamford. And the monks heard the horn blowing that they blew that night. Truthful men who kept watch at night said that it seemed to them there might be about 20 or 30 hornblowers. This was seen and heard all through Lenten-tide. And it was the monks at Peterborough who commented on this in 1132, and it was supposed to be a response to the appointment of a bad abbot over them. Now let's look at King Hurler now. The Germanic king Hurler made a foolish deal with the king of Fairylands. They each pledged to attend the wedding of the other's child. So the Fairy King turns up to fulfill his after bargain with a dazzling entourage. Then, later, it's the mortals' turn. But before leaving Fairyland, King Hurler is given a grimly stark warning and a small bloodhound as a parting gift. His trickster host says, "Do not dismount until this dog leaps to the ground from the lap it is sitting in." So off they go, and later a man in the procession dismounts his horse to check the bridle, and to the horror of his friends turns to dust. They also later find out from a traveller that centuries have gone by since they entered Fairyland. The bloodhound never leaves Hurler's lap, so the whole party are destined to wander for eternity, becoming a wild hunt. Who knows why the Fairy King tricked them so? Maybe they broke a taboo by eating and drinking in his land, which is against common folk belief and all advice. Some say Shook is a hound of the Hurler thing, who can be heard howling on the wintry winds and seeking lost souls at the darker time of year. A 12th century writer, Walter Map, describes the Hurler thing, which he related to this real person. However, some sources suggest that he is mistaking a nickname for Odin Wotan for a leader called Hurler, who we've already seen, King Hurler. Thing denotes a group of people in Old English. There is one other legend that Hurler's wild hunt, for some reason, drowned in the River Wye in Herefordshire in the reign of King Henry II, and has not been seen ever after. And now a slide provided kindly by Churchman Cigarettes, a fine export from Ipswich to poison the rest of the world. And in those cigarettes, there once used to be these cards. This one is Wild Edric and the Elf Maiden. And Edric the Wild is a tradition that existed well into the 19th century for a wild hunt led by Edric the Wild. He's mentioned in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, he's mentioned in the Orderic Vitalis, and in a document by John of Worcester as a Saxon from Shropshire leading rebellion against the Norman occupation in the years immediately after 1066 with some Welsh allies. The legend says that he still lies within the lead mines of a Shropshire hill, is doomed to ride out until a great Norman wrong is righted. His appearance is said to presage war, and part of his legend is that he took a fairy wife who made him promise that he did not reveal his past to anyone. When he broke the promise, he disappeared from the mundane world. Edric's not the only historic character to reportedly lead the hunt in England. There's Sir Francis Drake, who has the honour in the Dartmoor area. But I wonder why that great Fenland Saxon hero Herod the Wake, who also gave the Normans a hard time, didn't end up attached to the legend. Or even Robin Hood. Maybe they were, but the stories are lost. Or maybe they were seen as essentially too good of characters to deserve that sort of fate. So far, I've talked mainly of male leaders of the Wild Hunt, but there are some female leaders of the hunt in Germany, certainly. The goddesses Perchte and Holder or Holler. You can see them here. Well, Perchte, you can see on the left, they're said to gather up children, sometimes termed the Oligo, or give them presents. However, they also punish women who don't get their work done in a timely fashion. So woe betide the lazy spinner. In Scandinavia, there are feminine leaders. Freya or Frigga, those goddesses, may lead it there. However, more often the hunt is named after variants of the god Odin's name, such as Odin's Jagd, Odin's hunt. The Norse version of the hunt was often seen chasing a solitary, beautiful, otherworldly maiden. This maiden may be described as a woodwife in Switzerland and Germany, or even a mermaid in Jutland. Denmark simply refers to her as an elf, but Sweden describes her as one of the Hulderfolk, hidden folk. However, you'll see, boy, I love the Danish legend of a hunt pursuing a woman called Slattenpat. Now, Slattenpat is an ugly old woman whose name translates as wobbly boob. And when the hunt comes, she throws her breasts over her shoulders to escape. King Woden is sometimes the leader of the hunt in Denmark, as is Valdemar Atterdag. Right, off to Sweden. Swedish folklore describes the hunter Odin as having red hair and a beard, which are normally associated with his brother Thor. Yet Odin can also be nicknamed Brooding, meaning red beard, so maybe he shares his brother's hair colour. And the hunt is sometimes termed Hjadjan the eternal battle. I bet I pronounced that wrong. Um, in Norway, it's called the Oscarei, and it's led by Sigurd Svein and Guro Risarova. But Sigurd Fanisbani and Gudrun Gudjetsdottir from the sagas also put in an appearance. One named witch called Guro Risarova, which is Gudrun Horsetail, could also make an appearance. She appears to be another name for Gudrun Gudjetsdottir, who had unrequited love for Sigurd, who colonised Iceland. The Yule hunt seems to be the most popular for here there in the sagas. There's also an Oscarrea and the Asgardrea, the ride of Asgard, Odin's form of heaven, and Gandride, the ride of death. And the theme of the wild hunt must have travelled with Scandinavian settlers initially, mostly from Norway. The wild hunt is not a purely Germanic Norse phenomenon. It has parallels in the more Celtic areas of the UK as well. After all, until the sequence of Roman, Saxon, Norse and Norman invasion, most of Great Britain had a mainly Brythonic Briton population, which survived in some areas independently. In the West Country, the Gabriel hounds are usually associated with the West Country, but I have heard references to them in tales from Yorkshire. In Somerset, they're called Gabriel Ratchets, and in Devon, they're known as the Yeth hounds or Wisht hounds. And there's a strong tradition of them issuing from Wistman's Wood, one of the most magical places I personally know of, on Midsummer's Night, led by Dua, a polite name for the old gentleman or devil. Some say that they chase the souls of unbaptized babies, whilst others argue they are themselves such spirits transformed by Dua. The Elizabethan hero Sir Francis Drake is sometimes named as leader of the hunt in this area, particularly around the Dartmoor and Buckland Abbey areas where he once lived. There's a quote from Wales, and of all the hounds he'd seen in the world, he'd seen no dogs the colour of these. The colour that was on them was a brilliant shining white, and their ears red. And as the whiteness of their bodies shone, so the redness of their ears glistened. And he saw a horseman coming towards him upon a large light grey steed, with a hunting horn round his neck, and clad in garments of grey. And this is from the momentous Mabinogion story at the part where Phil, the Prince of Diffid, dares to meet King Aron of the Netherworld with his pack. And in Wales, the huntsman can also be Gwythanudd, with the kin Enun, better known as the Hounds of Enun Hell. And the ensemble seems to sometimes augment a separate wild hunt led by King Arthur and his retinue of knights, who mainly seek a monstrous boar Triff. I'm sure the Welsh speakers there are probably throwing bricks at their computer screens by now. But anyway, the role of King Arthur as a king in the supernatural realms was written about by Etienne de Rouen in around 1168. This theme was expanded in about 1211 by Gervase of Tilbury, who records that King Arthur actually becomes Lord of the Wild Hunt. There's one other Welsh wild hunt which spills over into other areas, and this is the evil priest Dando and his dandy dogs. He was said to have hunted on a Sunday, and when quarry could not be found, he tried that he would go as far as hell for a good hunt. The dark gentleman appeared, as did some game, and so Dando carried the pursuit on forever after with his black canine friends. And then, of course, there's Herne the Hunter, or Conunnos, the Celtic antlered lord of animals, who somehow merges with Herne the Hunter to provide us with one of the best known British wild hunt stories, centred around the Great Windsor Park and Forest. And his fame has spread through Shakespeare's Merry Wives of Windsor. So, in Ireland, there's Finn McCall, and They have the Wild Hunt or the Theatre or the Loch Hunt, led by Finn McCall and his hounds. Occasionally, it's also termed the Fianna Mananan or the Fairy Cavalcade. On to Scotland and the Unseelie Court or the Hunt of Arthur O'Wara, led by a nursery rhyme character of that name, Old Swain, Scotland. As the nursery rhyme goes, Arthur O'Bower has broken his band, and he comes roaring up the land. The King of Scots, with all his power, cannot stop Arthur of the Bower. France has its unique Mesnir del Harlequin, the household of Harlequin. Well, they have to be different, don't they? The character of the diamond pattern costume, Harlequin, spreads across many countries and was an important part in the Italian plays that eventually developed into British pantomime. In France, he was a character in passion plays and he was seen as an emissary of the devil, but he's also seen as part of the clown tradition and is even claimed to be originated from Sufi spirituality. How that all fits in with the general wild hunt genre is not easy to answer, but leave a lot of difference. So, the wild hunt, devil dogs, black sugar, all this sort of stuff. Do not allow me in any way to persuade you or tempt you even to work with the myth of it. As they say in the best of cautionary tales, do not try this at home. For a start, it represents the darker side of life and death. So, for that reason alone, it's not for the faint-hearted or those of um, mental, spiritual, or physical strength. You may argue that to do so will bring you nearer to the gods and goddesses of the old pagan folk religions. And I'm certainly one to acknowledge the darker side of things as well as the lighter things. I hate the fluffy sort of thing that attaches to paganism sometimes. But as an experienced pagan, I have to say that there are safer, simpler ways of connecting your gods and goddesses and the spirits of the land. Of course, many other religions would suggest that you shouldn't get involved with anything that is supernatural, since it will inevitably lead you to evil and the devil. I will point out that most major religions are based upon stories of supernatural happenings, miracles, successful prayers, magic, yet they seem to mysteriously exempt themselves from this rule in an Orwellian, "Our magic good, their magic bad" sort of way. Also presumes that the individual believes in the concept of a devil anyway. So, what about modern interpretations of Black Shook and the Wild Hunt? Well, whatever the truth, a filmmaker called Will Rev Wright made a short movie, Wild Hunt, in Suffolk, about a man on a quest to investigate the myths. One featured in the film, which was premiered in Ipswich Film Theatre on Halloween 2006, and should not be confused with the 2009 Canadian horror film, also called The Wild Hunt. The Witcher, Wild Hunt has also been a role-playing game, and the theme is used in scores of fantasy books. And then from the poetry of W.B. Yeats, The Hosting of the Sith, to a book by Philip Pullman, Count Karlstein, The Wild Hunt is presented in a bewildering miscellany of form. The myth is also represented in classical music too, which it appears in the works by Liszt, Will Jagged from Etude Transcendental, and Carl Maria von Weber's opera Der Fischlust. Rock music has had many more examples that are worth listing, but check out the imagery used in song lyrics, album covers, and names by bands such as Omnia, Furious Horde, Skyclad, Falkerbach, and Bathory. You can also hear a song about Wild Hunt member Black Shook on the Lowestoft rock band Darkness first album. Unfortunately, they were only able to find one word to rhyme with the name Chuck, and it wasn't luck. That's probably why it didn't get played on the radio. Great act, though. Um, I was recently surprised to find that the classic American rock song Ride There's a Storm was derived from the band Doors, jamming around the tune of Ghost Riders in the Sky. If you're too young to remember it, The American folklore survival of its European past, telling the tale of cowboy spirits pursuing the devil's herd of cattle. If you compare the tunes, you'll find them very similar. So we're doodling around in the rehearsal room and, you know, doing things with it. But the late Jim Morrison, as much a poet and occultist as rock singer, came up with some new lyrics because he didn't think he could sing with Yippee-Yi-Yi and all that. So the Doors only got to play Ghost Riders in the Sky once on the second date of their last tour in New Orleans on the 12th of December 1970. It was on the album LA Woman. The rest of the tour was cancelled when Jim suddenly left for France, where he later died, maybe reinforcing the psychopomp idea once again. Interestingly, his ex-partner, Patricia Keneally Morrison, was a witch who originally lived in the town of Babylon, USA, between the Amityville and CX Wicker founder Ray Buckland. She died on the 27th of July 1971, allegedly from drug overdose in France, so maybe reinforcing the psychopomp idea once again. Chuck is also known as the Black Dog, and that name crops up as the title of a Led Zeppelin track with the lyrics, "Eyes that shine, burning red, dreams of you all through my head." There's also a separate song by Humble Pie, and Black Dog is the name, of course, given by Churchill to his bouts of depression. A film and book title, place name, publishers, and a fine real ale brewery. There was also an East Anglian border Morrisite named after Black Shook, who were brilliant but now sadly disbanded. And there's still a well-known border Morrisite called Wild Hunt from Croydon, who mask and draw upon legends and imagery. More recently, I took part in filming a documentary which was shown on BBC4 in 2009, Beowulf and Anglo-Saxon Poetry, which was presented by the prominent historian, one of my heroes, Michael Wood. It includes contributions by Dr. Sam Newton and Brian Glover. And it continues to be rebroadcast periodically. You can find it on YouTube, I think. Dr. Newton made the point that the scattering Beowulf appears to be the same Old English language root as Shook, and that Grendel, the monster in the pool, may have the connection to the East Anglian Anglo-Saxon derived dialect word grindle for a wet marshy place. I was pleased to relate the tale of Black Shook in Blythburgh, where the burnt claw mark is allegedly on the church door. Even the illustrious Shakespeare uses the legend in The Merry Wives of Windsor, where Mistress Page wants to frighten Falstaff. She says, "Sometimes if you sleep with an open window during the summer, when the weather is fine and the nights are light, you might suddenly be woken up by the frightful hurly-burly out in the forest right behind the house. There is shrieking and shouting and the barking of a whole pack of dogs, the thud of horse hooves, the cracking of broken branches, and so on. It's dreadful. It's no time to be out in the forest, for the hind hunts on. You'll shake and quiver, and your heart pounds at the sound of it. Sleeping's out of the question. If you're brave enough to take a peep out of the window in spite of it, oh, good gracious." So, no doubt, the legends of the Wild Hunt and its followers will continue to grow, mutate, fascinate, frighten, and inspire. Thank you very much for watching and listening to this presentation on the Wild Hunt and its followers. Now, the book I wrote of that title is out of print, but it is available as a Kindle for £4. But the good news is, if you can't find it as a second-hand book, the text has actually been republished. I brought out a collection of articles, stories, and pieces that were out of print within an anthology called When the Sea Turned to Beer. When the Sea Turned to Beer. And that's available, £8 paperback, £4 Kindle, along with all my other books out on Amazon. If you just put Pete Jennings into Amazon, you should find all my books on my own channel in there. Or if you get completely stuck, you can contact me or look at descriptions of all the books and so on, and prices at my website, www.gibberswick.org. That's email gibberswick@btinternet.com. So, thank you very much.